A hard-working waitress thought it was just another ordinary day, till a silent observer changed her life forever. Emily wiped her hands on her apron for the 5th time that morning, feeling the familiar sting of exhaustion in her arms. She had been on her feet since before sunrise, her shift at the small-town diner stretching long into the afternoon. The diner was modest, with cracked vinyl booths and a faint smell of frying bacon that lingered in the air no matter how many times the staff cleaned. Emily had worked here for almost 3 years. While the job didn't pay much, kept a roof over her head and allowed her to take care of her younger brother Jake, who had just started high school. Their parents had passed away when Jake was only 10, leaving Emily, barely 20 at the time, to become his guardian. She had grown up fast, learning to manage life's challenges with quiet determination. The bell above the diner door jingled, and Emily plastered on her usual warm smile, ready to greet the next customer. She had perfected the art of being cheerful, even when her legs ached and her feet screamed for a break. It was second nature to her now. Customers often commented on her sunny demeanor. Unaware that beneath the surface, Emily was constantly juggling worries about bills, school fees, and the car that had seen better days. She loved her brother dearly, and every effort she made was for him. Each tip she earned, each extra hour she put in, was part of the plan to give Jake a stable, happy life. The diner wasn't crowded that morning, but Emily treated every guest as if they were the only one there. A man in a faded baseball cap lingered near the counter, reading a menu he had clearly studied for longer than usual. Emily approached him with her practiced politeness, offering a friendly, "Hi, what can I get for you today?" The man glanced up briefly, nodded, and muttered something about coffee and a slice of pie. He didn't seem particularly interesting, and Emily went on to take orders from the rest of the customers. But she noticed him now and then, a quiet presence that didn't belong to the usual morning crowd. She moved from table to table, balancing plates and coffee cups, her movements fluid and practiced. There was the elderly couple who always ordered scrambled eggs and toast, and she remembered to add extra jam for Mrs. Peters because she loved it. There was a young mother struggling to keep her toddler entertained while eating her breakfast, and Emily discreetly distracted the child with a small paper napkin puppet she made on the spot. Every small act of kindness was automatic to her, something she didn't even think about. She just did it because it felt right. By the time Emily returned to the counter to refill coffee pots, she noticed the man in the corner, still watching her. His expression was calm but attentive, like he was studying her every move. She felt a little uneasy, though she quickly brushed it off. The diner was a small place, and there was nothing unusual about someone observing their waitress. She kept working, smiling at customers, chatting lightly, moving with the practiced efficiency she had honed over years of hard labor. Her mind, however, wandered briefly to her brother. She hoped he had eaten breakfast properly, hoped he hadn't been late for school again, hoped she was doing enough to make his life easier. As the morning wore on, more customers trickled in. Emily took their orders, managed to remember who liked what, and diffused small conflicts with calm words and gentle humor. A teenager at the end of the counter complained about the wrong order, but Emily quickly fixed it and offered a free refill of soda, turning his frown into a smile. It was exhausting, but she never let it show. Each interaction reminded her why she loved her job despite its hardships. She was part of the lives of the people who came into the diner, even in small ways. She liked to think she made their mornings a little brighter. The man in the corner didn't move much. He drank his coffee slowly, occasionally glancing at the door as though measuring the flow of customers coming in. Emily began to feel a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Who was he? Why was he watching so intently? She had seen regulars observe her before, but there was something different about this man. Still, she pushed the thought aside. There was always work to be done, orders to be taken, dishes to be washed, and plates to be cleared. Worrying about a single customer wasn't worth her time. By noon, Emily's legs ached and her stomach grumbled, but she couldn't afford to slow down. Her shift was far from over. She grabbed a plate of hash browns for a table near the window, smiling warmly at the couple who had come in for their lunch break. The man in the corner shifted slightly, taking a sip of coffee as if timing her every movement. Emily noticed but ignored it. Life was full of little pressures and interruptions. She had learned early on that patience and focus were the keys to surviving them. She continued her work with calm efficiency, never letting her fatigue show. Throughout it all, Emily maintained a quiet hopefulness. She didn't expect recognition or praise. She simply wanted to do her best and provide a sense of normalcy and comfort in her own small way for her brother, for herself, and for the people who came into the diner looking for a simple meal and a smile. Little did she know, the quiet attentiveness of the man in the corner was not ordinary at all. The day, which had begun like any other, was quietly setting the stage for something extraordinary. By mid-afternoon, Emily had served dozens of customers, each interaction demanding a little more energy than the last. Yet she persisted, driven by love, duty, and an innate kindness that never faltered. The man in the corner, the quiet observer, continued to watch, taking in every gesture, every smile, and every moment of genuine care that Emily offered. And still, Emily remained unaware that her everyday acts of decency and warmth were about to be noticed in a way that would change her life forever. Her shift was a blur of motion, of dishes clinking, coffee machines hissing, and friendly chatter. She wiped down tables, refilled salt shakers, and smiled through her growing exhaustion. Each action was performed with precision, each word spoken with sincerity. To Emily, this was life, the demanding, exhausting, yet profoundly human rhythm of caring for others. But unbeknownst to her, somewhere between the laughter of children, the clatter of plates, and the hum of conversation, someone was witnessing not just her work, but the heart behind it, and that someone would soon ensure that Emily's selfless dedication did not go unnoticed. The man in the corner continued to sit quietly, sipping his coffee, while Emily moved around the diner with her usual energy and warmth. She didn't know it yet, but he was paying close attention to her every action, noticing not just how efficiently she worked, but how kindly she treated each person who walked through the door. He was a man who had seen much of the world, someone used to privilege and influence, but he was drawn not to wealth or power, but to genuine character. And Emily's natural kindness immediately stood out. Emily approached a table where a young mother was struggling to keep her restless toddler calm. The mother was frazzled, juggling her purse, her coffee, and the small child who refused to sit still. Emily knelt down beside the child, making silly faces and using a napkin to create a little puppet. The child giggled uncontrollably, momentarily distracted from the tantrum that had started to build. The mother looked relieved, giving Emily a grateful smile that said more than words ever could. The man in the corner observed quietly, noticing the gentle patience Emily exhibited. It's the way she offered help without expecting anything in return. It wasn't just the act itself that impressed him, it was the sincerity behind it. While continuing her work, Emily noticed a man at the counter who seemed frustrated with the menu. He squinted at it, muttering under his breath. Without being asked, she approached him with a friendly tone. "Having trouble deciding? I can help," she said, smiling. The man looked at her skeptically at first, then nodded. Emily patiently explained the specials and even recommended her favorite dishes, making sure to highlight options she thought he would enjoy. The man eventually smiled, appreciating the guidance. Again, the man in the corner quietly took note, watching Emily as she moved from one table to another, always attentive, always calm. Emily didn't have time to think about who was watching. She was too busy juggling orders, refilling drinks, and ensuring each customer felt attended to. She prided herself on being efficient without being rushed, kind without being intrusive. She treated the man in the corner just like any other customer, polite, attentive, and professional. She didn't give him any special attention, and he noticed that. To him, this was remarkable. Many people, when they suspected they were being observed, would have tried to impress or exaggerate their behavior, but Emily was completely authentic. Every smile, every gesture of care was natural, not performed. Around mid-morning, a man entered the diner who clearly could not afford a meal. He wandered hesitantly near the counter, looking embarrassed. Emily noticed him immediately and approached with gentle curiosity. "Can I help you?" she asked kindly. The man admitted he didn't have enough money for a full meal. Without hesitation, Emily offered him a cup of coffee and a slice of pie on the house, smiling as she did so. The man's eyes welled up with gratitude, and he muttered a quiet thank you. The observer in the corner leaned back slightly in his chair, impressed by her instinctive generosity. He had traveled to many places and had never seen someone so genuinely compassionate to strangers. Without even a second thought, the diner began to fill with more customers as the day progressed. Emily's energy never faltered. She handled complaints with tact and humor, smiled at shy customers, and even helped an elderly man reach for a cup from the top shelf when no one else was around. She made time for everyone, small gestures that might seem insignificant, but created a sense of warmth and belonging. To Emily, these actions were just part of her day, but to the observer, they were extraordinary. Each small act was evidence of her character, a reflection of someone who lived her life with empathy and integrity. During a brief lull, Emily returned to the counter to refill the coffee pots. The man in the corner finally made eye contact with her. "You're very good at what you do," he said quietly, his voice calm but sincere. Emily blinked, slightly startled, then smiled politely. "Thank you. I just try to make everyone feel welcome," she replied, thinking it was just a polite compliment from a stranger. She didn't know who he was or why he seemed so interested in her. She had learned not to expect anything from strangers, so she didn't read too much into it. Still, she felt a strange, comforting warmth at his words. Though she quickly returned to her duties, keeping the smile on her face as she moved through the diner, Emily's shift continued, and the morning gradually turned into early afternoon. Orders came in steadily, and she handled them with practiced skill. At one point, a table of teenagers complained about a wrong order, their voices rising with frustration. Emily approached calmly, apologized sincerely, and immediately offered a replacement meal. She even threw in a free dessert to ease the situation. By the time she walked away, the teenagers were laughing, thanking her for turning a frustrating experience into something pleasant. The man in the corner nodded to himself, impressed not just by her efficiency, but by her emotional intelligence and her ability to diffuse tension with kindness. Emily thought briefly about her brother as she cleared tables. She hoped he had eaten breakfast, and she wondered whether he had managed to get to school on time. Life was always full of small worries for her school fees, bills. A car that constantly broke down, but she didn't let them weigh her down in front of others. She had learned that kindness and patience were stronger than stress and anger. Even when her body ached and her feet throbbed from standing all morning, she never allowed it to affect the way she treated people. To Emily, her job wasn't just about serving food. It was about making the day brighter for those who came through the diner's doors. The man continued to watch her, quietly noting everything. The way she laughed with children, the way she helped struggling parents, the calm patience she showed to customers who were difficult or rude. He could tell she was genuinely interested in others' well-being, not just fulfilling the duties of her job. It was rare to see someone act so selflessly, so naturally, and without expecting recognition or reward. He felt a quiet admiration for her and began to wonder how he could reward someone whose kindness had clearly touched everyone around her. As Emily moved through the diner, wiping tables and refilling drinks, she remained unaware that her every gesture, every smile, every act of quiet generosity had been noticed. She had no idea that someone was watching with a keen eye, not just for her efficiency, but for her heart. The man's presence was a silent acknowledgement of the impact she had, even when she thought no one was paying attention. He watched her continue her work, impressed by the way she carried herself through the busy morning with dignity, patience, and grace. By the time the early lunch rush started, Emily was moving quickly but carefully, ensuring that every customer was served promptly and warmly. She smiled at the elderly man she helped earlier, checked on the young mother with the toddler, and ensured that each table was comfortable and happy. The observer remained in his seat, sipping coffee, taking careful mental notes. Emily's work wasn't extraordinary in the way of fame or wealth, but it was extraordinary in the quiet way she lived her life with thoughtfulness, generosity, and a kindness that touched everyone she encountered. As the morning turned into afternoon, Emily wiped her hands on her apron, pausing for just a moment to catch her breath. The diner was alive with conversation, clattering dishes, and laughter. She moved toward the counter, still smiling, still attentive, still unaware that her simple acts of decency and warmth had caught the attention of a man who would soon change her life. The stage was quietly set, and Emily, in her natural, unassuming way, had no idea that this ordinary day was about to turn into something unforgettable. Emily hardly noticed the clock ticking above the diner counter, her mind and body completely absorbed in the rhythm of her work. She moved from table to table, clearing plates, refilling drinks, taking orders, and offering a kind word here and there. The lunch crowd had come and gone, leaving the diner quieter, but Emily's attention to her customers never wavered. She wiped a table where a couple had just finished their meal and smiled at the child who had been too shy to eat it first, encouraging them to try the last bite of their pancake. The man in the corner had not left, continued to watch, quietly observing her every gesture. He noticed the way she instinctively checked to make sure everyone had enough napkins, refilled salt and pepper shakers without being asked, and always made eye contact with the customers, listening carefully to what they said. She treated everyone with the same warmth. Whether it was the wealthy businessman who came in for a quick lunch, or the young mother struggling to keep her child under control, to him, it was clear that her kindness was natural, not performed, and it was something rare and beautiful. Emily moved toward a table where a group of teenagers had just sat down. They were noisy, joking, and laughing loudly, and one of them complained that the menu was confusing. Instead of reacting impatiently, Emily smiled and took the time to guide them through the options. She recommended a few dishes, even teasing a little about the teenagers' choice of extra cheese on a burger. The group laughed, and one of them even apologized for being difficult. Emily's patience and sense of humor made the small tension dissolve instantly, and the man in the corner silently nodded to himself, impressed by her ability to handle challenging situations with grace. Between tasks, Emily checked on her younger brother in her mind. She knew he had tests at school that day and hoped he was doing okay. The thought of him often gave her strength to keep going, to maintain her cheerful demeanor despite the physical and emotional exhaustion she felt. She didn't complain, though. Complaining would not help anyone, and she had learned early on that showing patience and positivity often helped more than words could. The man in the corner observed this quiet strength as well. He noticed how Emily didn't just perform her job. She lived it with thoughtfulness, making the experience better for everyone around her. Around mid-afternoon, a man entered the diner looking worried and embarrassed. Emily immediately recognized the signs of someone struggling. He hesitated near the counter, clearly unsure of what to do. Emily approached him with a gentle smile and asked if she could help. The man admitted that he didn't have enough money to pay for a full meal. Emily didn't hesitate for even a moment. She offered him a coffee and a small sandwich on the house, saying kindly, "It's no problem. Everyone deserves a warm meal." The man's eyes filled with gratitude, and he mumbled a heartfelt thank you before finding a place to sit. The observer watched closely, feeling admiration grow for someone whose compassion was instinctive and sincere. Emily continued to serve the customers, balancing trays with drinks and plates, refilling ketchup bottles, and checking on tables. She had no idea that the man in the corner had begun to quietly take note of small details about her life. He overheard her speaking with a coworker about how she was saving money for her brother's school fees and trying to fix her old, unreliable car. Her voice held no complaint, only determination. The man realized that Emily's life was not easy, but her attitude and character remained unshakable. He was moved by how she carried her responsibilities without bitterness, treating every customer and every situation with patience and care. A group of office workers came in for a late lunch, clearly in a rush. One of them accidentally spilled their drink, causing a minor mess. Emily immediately rushed over, helping to clean up, reassuring them it was fine, and getting them fresh drinks and napkins. She even joked lightly to ease the tension, and the group smiled and laughed. The man in the corner noticed her multitasking and her ability to handle multiple challenges simultaneously without losing her composure. He had never seen someone so capable and kind in equal measure. Emily moved toward the counter to refill the coffee pot, wiping her hands on her apron. She felt a brief fatigue creeping in, but she pushed it aside. There was always more work to do, more customers to serve, more small acts of kindness to give. She smiled at the man in the corner as she passed by, and he returned a small nod, still watching, still paying attention. Emily assumed he was just being polite, and she continued about her work, completely unaware of how carefully he had been observing her all day. As the afternoon wore on, Emily cleared plates from a family table. Noticing the mother and father whispering quietly to each other while their children played with crayons, she smiled and refilled their drinks without interrupting them, sensing that they wanted some quiet time. She moved to another table where a college student was struggling with a complicated order. She patiently explained the menu, helped him choose a meal, and even offered some advice on a quick snack for later. Every action she performed was thoughtful, intentional, and done with kindness. The man in the corner began to see a pattern. Emily's life was not just about serving food, it was about caring for people in subtle ways. She noticed struggles without being asked, offered help without expecting recognition, and treated everyone with equal respect. To him, it was clear that Emily had a heart that was rare in the world. She didn't seek attention, praise, or reward. She simply acted with empathy and understanding. It was extraordinary, even if it seemed ordinary to her. Emily's thoughts briefly wandered to her brother again. She hoped he was studying, hoped he was eating well, hoped she was providing him with enough stability in a life that had been complicated since their parents passed. The man in the corner watched as she paused for a moment, her eyes softening as she thought of someone else before herself. He could tell that her kindness extended beyond the diner, that it was part of who she was, not just part of her job. It was an authenticity he found rare and remarkable as the afternoon grew quieter. Emily took a short break to refill her water and catch her breath. She leaned slightly against the counter, wiped her brow, and smiled at the small child coloring at a table near the window. The child looked up, smiled, and waved. Emily waved back, and the observer in the corner quietly smiled to himself, appreciating how natural and effortless her warmth seemed. She had no idea that someone was noticing, recording in memory every kind act, every patient word, every small moment that reflected her true character. The man finished his coffee slowly, sipping and watching as Emily continued her work. He observed the way she carried herself, the gentle confidence in her movements, and the quiet strength in her demeanor. He knew that she had faced challenges most people couldn't imagine, and yet she carried herself with grace. Her actions were not just a reflection of her hard work. They were evidence of her inner goodness, her selflessness, and her determination to make life better for those around her. By the time mid-afternoon rolled into late afternoon, Emily had served dozens of customers, handled complaints, and helped people in small but meaningful ways that most would never notice. As she wiped a final table and looked around the diner, her body tired but her heart full. The man in the corner quietly gathered his belongings, still observing, and thought about how he could somehow acknowledge the remarkable young woman who had spent the day spreading kindness without expecting anything in return. He had watched her carefully, taking note of her patience, generosity, and the genuine compassion she showed to every person she encountered. Emily had no idea that her simple, everyday actions were about to be recognized in a way she could never have imagined. She was simply doing what she had always done, caring for others, smiling, and giving her best, even when no one was watching. And yet, someone had noticed, someone who valued her goodness more than she could ever imagine. The ordinary day she had thought she was simply surviving had quietly become extraordinary in the eyes of someone who would change her life forever. The diner had quieted down now, the lunch rush long gone, leaving only the soft hum of the coffee machine and the faint clatter of dishes in the background. Emily wiped down a table near the window, stretching slightly as she moved from chair to chair. Her legs ached from standing all day, and her feet throbbed inside her worn shoes. Despite the fatigue, she kept a bright smile on her face, greeting the few remaining customers warmly. She didn't notice the man in the corner, who had finished his coffee some time ago, observing her with an intensity that made it clear he had been paying attention for hours. As Emily moved toward the counter, she noticed something unusual. There, tucked neatly beneath a small stack of menus, was an envelope. It wasn't the typical stack of bills or receipts that often got left around. It was thicker, heavier, and had a crispness that made it stand out. Emily's brow furrowed slightly as she picked it up, wondering who it could be from. She opened it carefully, expecting perhaps a thank you note, a coupon, or some small token of appreciation from a customer or the diner's management. Inside, she found a handwritten note, folded neatly and written in elegant, careful handwriting. Emily's eyes scanned the words slowly. The note praised her for her kindness, patience, and hard work. It mentioned how her genuine care for every customer had not gone unnoticed, how her small acts of generosity, from helping struggling parents to encouraging children, made the world a better place. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as she read, her heart swelling with a mixture of disbelief and warmth. She had never expected recognition for simply doing what she felt was right then. As she unfolded the note further, her eyes widened in shock. Beneath the heartfelt words lay something she had never imagined she would see. A check, neatly tucked inside the envelope, with an amount large enough to change her life, $10,000. Emily froze, the envelope slipping slightly from her hands as she tried to process what she was seeing. Her mind raced. Who would do this? Why? And why her? She felt a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an almost overwhelming sense of joy. Emily's hand shook as she held the check, her mind flashing through everything she could do with this unexpected gift. She thought of her brother, Jake, and the school fees she had been struggling to pay. She thought of the car that barely ran, which made getting to work and school a constant challenge. She thought of all the small debts she had been quietly managing, never asking for help. This check could solve so many problems at once. But even more than that, it was validation proof that someone had seen her effort, her heart, and her commitment to others. For a moment, Emily looked around the diner, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had left it. But he was gone. She felt a pang of disappointment. She wanted to thank him, to tell him how much this meant to her, but it seemed he had disappeared without a trace. She glanced at the other customers, all quietly enjoying their meals, unaware of the extraordinary moment that had just unfolded right in their midst. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her life had changed in an instant, and yet nothing about the diner had changed. She still had work to do, tables to clear, customers to smile at. Emily slipped the check into her pocket and returned to her work. But her mind was racing with possibilities. She began to imagine the relief on Jake's face when she could finally pay for his school fees in full. She thought of how she could fix the car so she wouldn't have to rely on public transportation or walk long distances and bad weather. She even considered putting a small amount aside for emergencies, something she had never been able to do before. Every small worry that had weighed on her seemed to lift slightly, replaced by hope and gratitude, despite the shock and excitement. Emily continued to move through the diner with her usual grace. She greeted the few remaining customers, refilled coffee cups, and wiped down tables, all while her mind replayed the note and the check over and over. She felt a strange mix of disbelief and happiness, as if she were dreaming and yet unable to wake up. The thought that someone had been watching her, noticing not just her work, but the way she treated people, and had chosen to reward her for it, filled her with a deep sense of validation she had never known before. She thought back to the morning, to the small moments she had barely noticed: the young mother struggling with her toddler, the elderly man reaching for a cup, the teenagers frustrated with the wrong order. Each act had been done instinctively, with no expectation of reward, and yet here she was, receiving recognition in a way she could never have imagined. It was as if the universe had taken notice of her quiet dedication, and now, in a tangible way, was returning it to her. Emily's mind wandered to the man who had left the envelope. She wondered who he was, why he had chosen her, and how he had known about her life and struggles. The idea that a stranger could see her efforts so clearly, appreciate them so profoundly, and respond with such generosity was almost overwhelming. She felt gratitude not just for the money, but for the belief someone had placed in her worth and her character. It was a gift far beyond financial help. It was a gift of acknowledgement and hope. As she continued her work, Emily's thoughts also turned to the future. With this unexpected help, she could focus more on her brother, ensuring he had the stability and opportunities he deserved. She could relieve some of the constant pressure she felt, allowing herself to breathe more easily, to rest more when needed, and to approach life with renewed energy. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the freedom and security it represented, and the chance to continue living with the kindness and care she had always practiced. Now, without the crushing weight of worry, by the end of the afternoon, Emily had composed herself enough to sit for a brief moment, holding the envelope in her hands and staring at it in quiet awe. The diner was empty now, the soft hum of the lights and the faint clatter of dishes her only company. She reflected on how ordinary the day had seemed at first, how routine her morning had been, and yet how extraordinary it had become. Every small choice she had made, every kind word and helpful gesture, had contributed to this moment. She realized that her actions, even when unnoticed, held power beyond what she had ever imagined. Emily thought about how she would tell Jake. She imagined his surprise, his wide eyes, and his laughter when she told him that their worries would be eased, that they could move forward without the constant stress that had shadowed their lives. She felt a deep sense of love and protection for him, knowing that this gift would allow her to provide for him in ways she had only dreamed of before. The realization that someone had recognized her hard work and her heart made her feel seen in a way she never had before, and it inspired her to continue living with the same generosity and patience that had brought her to this moment. The man who had left the envelope had vanished as quietly as he had appeared. Emily had no way of knowing who he was or why he had chosen her specifically. All she could do was hold the note, treasure it, and let it guide the next steps in her life. She felt a new sense of responsibility, not just to her brother, not just to her own future, but to live in a way that honored the trust and recognition someone had placed in her. The money was a blessing, but the acknowledgement of her character was a gift she would carry forever. As the evening approached, Emily cleaned the last tables, restocked the condiments, and turned off the coffee machine. The diner was quiet now, and the sunlight filtered softly through the windows. She looked around, took a deep breath, and allowed herself a small, private moment of joy. Her life had changed in ways she could barely comprehend, and yet the core of who she was, kind, hard-working, patient, remained the same. The extraordinary surprise of the envelope had shown her that her efforts mattered, that her kindness had power, and that sometimes life rewards people in ways they least expect, but most deserve. Emily tucked the envelope safely into her bag and stepped outside for a brief breath of fresh air. The day had been long, exhausting, and yet profoundly transformative. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt a renewed sense of hope and possibility. The diner, her work, her brother, and her life, all the things she had carried with quiet determination, now felt lighter, brighter, and full of promise. And though the mysterious benefactor had disappeared without a trace, Emily knew that his recognition and the faith he had placed in her would stay with her forever. Emily held the envelope close to her chest as she walked home that evening, the soft glow of the streetlights guiding her path. Each step felt lighter than it had in years, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The shock and disbelief from earlier had slowly begun to transform into a quiet, steady joy. She had been recognized for her kindness and hard work in a way she'd never expected, and now the possibilities seemed endless. Her mind was alive with plans and dreams she had long postponed because of the constant financial pressure she carried as she approached her small apartment. Emily thought about Jake. Her younger brother had been working hard at school, often taking on extra responsibilities to help her at home. She imagined the look on his face when she told him that the money would cover his school fees completely. She imagined the relief in his voice and the excitement in his eyes. For so long, Emily had worried about providing him with stability and opportunities, and now she finally felt like she could breathe. She opened the door quietly, wanting to surprise him. Jake looked up from his homework as Emily entered, tired but smiling. "Hey, Em," he said, not noticing the envelope in her hands. She kneeled beside him, gently brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered, "I have something important to tell you." His curiosity was immediate. Emily carefully explained that their worries about school and transportation could now be eased. that the money she had received would help cover fees and fix the car. His eyes widened, and for a moment he simply stared at her, speechless. Then he grinned, a bright, joyful smile spreading across his face. "Really? That's amazing," he exclaimed. Emily hugged him tightly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Emily went to the bank to deposit the check and began planning how best to use it responsibly. She made sure the school fees for Jake were paid in full, something she had been stressing over for months. She scheduled the car repairs she had delayed for so long, finally ensuring reliable transportation for both herself and her brother. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of security and peace that went beyond the immediate relief of money. It was a reassurance that life could be brighter, and that her efforts and kindness had real value. Back at the diner, Emily returned to work the next day as though nothing had changed. Her routine remained the same, serving customers, clearing tables, and maintaining her warm, cheerful demeanor. But inside, she carried a renewed sense of confidence and pride. She no longer worried constantly about whether her hard work would ever pay off. She knew that her life could improve not just through effort, but sometimes through unexpected generosity and recognition. Each smile she shared with customers now held a deeper joy. Each act of kindness reinforced by the knowledge that her good heart had been noticed and valued. Word eventually spread about the mysterious benefactor who had visited the diner. Emily's manager, curious and slightly baffled, mentioned that the story had caught local attention, though the man's identity remained unknown. Emily laughed quietly to herself, shaking her head in disbelief. She had always believed that acts of kindness mattered, even if no one noticed. But she had never imagined that someone would recognize her so profoundly or reward her in such a meaningful way. It reinforced a lesson she had always tried to live by. True goodness is its own reward. But sometimes the universe has a way of returning it in ways beyond imagination. Emily continued to serve the diners, patrons with the same attention and care as before. But there was a subtle change in her demeanor, a quiet glow of hope and assurance that others seemed to notice. Regular customers remarked that she seemed more relaxed, more confident, and even more genuinely cheerful. Emily didn't explain the change. She simply let her actions speak. Her small acts of kindness, the napkin puppets for children, the gentle guidance for unsure customers, the thoughtful gestures for those in need, continued to ripple through the lives of the people she served. It was a reminder that even in ordinary, everyday work, extraordinary impact could be made through simple, sincere actions. As the weeks passed, Emily reflected on the lessons she had learned from the experience. She realized that life could be unpredictable, that challenges could appear without warning, but that her values, kindness, patience, and empathy remained constant and powerful tools for navigating any situation. The anonymous gift had provided more than financial help. It had given her validation, encouragement, and the reassurance that the world could reward those who lived with integrity and care. She became even more committed to helping others, quietly paying it forward whenever she could, whether through small gestures for customers at the diner or extra support for friends and neighbors in need. Emily and Jake's life gradually stabilized. With school fees paid and the car repaired, Jake could focus more on his studies, and Emily could devote her energy to both her work and their home life without the constant shadow of financial worry. The transformation, though practical, was also emotionally felt lighter, more capable, and more hopeful than she had in years. She began to dream again, thinking about ways she could improve their future further, perhaps even saving toward a small vacation or investing in skills to advance her career. For the first time in a long time, the future felt open and full of possibility. Though Emily never met the mysterious benefactor again, she often thought of him with gratitude. She wondered if he had chosen her because he saw something special in her character, something ordinary people might overlook. She realized that his gift had more than monetary value. It had been a recognition of her humanity, her dedication, and her consistent efforts to make the lives of others better. It reminded her that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could have profound consequences. Reaching far beyond what one might imagine, Emily also learned that the true measure of generosity was not in grandeur or fame, but in noticing and valuing what others often take for granted. The man's gesture had been quiet and private, leaving no fanfare or public recognition, but its impact on her life was immense. She came to understand that acts of goodness, whether recognized or not, mattered deeply, and that the authenticity of one's heart could touch lives in unseen and powerful ways. Back at the diner, Emily continued her work, still juggling the demands of a busy kitchen, the expectations of customers and the small crises that came with running a daily service, but she now faced each day with a sense of assurance and peace. She knew that her dedication mattered, that her efforts could create change, and that kindness had its own reward. She smiled more icily, laughed more freely, and approached challenges with renewed energy, inspiring those around her without ever needing to announce her story. Her relationship with Jake strengthened as well. He noticed the change in his sister, the way she seemed more confident, less burdened, more joyful. They shared moments together that had previously been clouded by worry. Movie nights, walks in the park, and small celebrations for achievements at school. Emily felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the gift had allowed her to give her brother the stability and happiness he deserved. It reinforced the importance of her efforts, showing her that love and care could create tangible, positive effects in the lives of those she held dear. Months later, Emily reflected quietly in the diner during a rare moment of calm. She looked around at the customers she had come to know and care for, at the routines she had maintained, and at the small but meaningful connections she had built over the years. She realized that her life, though ordinary in appearance, had become extraordinary through persistence, kindness, and integrity. The gift she had received had been life-changing. Yes, but it had also reaffirmed a deeper truth. Living with compassion and authenticity made a lasting impact, often in ways one might never fully see. Emily's story gradually spread, quietly inspiring others in her town. People admired her for her warmth, her dedication, and her ability to face life's challenges with courage and kindness. She never boasted about the gifts she had received, letting it remain a private testament to the power of generosity and the value of living a good life. Yet the ripple effect of her actions continued, touching the lives of customers, neighbors, and even strangers who witnessed her integrity. In the end, Emily realized that the extraordinary surprise of the envelope had done more than solve financial problems. It had taught her to believe in the goodness of people, to trust that effort and kindness mattered, and to carry forward the lessons of generosity she had been shown. Her life continued, filled with hope, joy, and determination. Every day, she served customers with a smile, cared for her brother with devotion, and quietly spread kindness wherever she went. Forever changed by a moment that began as an ordinary day and turned into something unforgettable.